Namaste, namaste, everybody. We have the most remarkable human being sitting before us this day. So now I want to welcome you all, of course, wherever you may be, whatever time zone you're in, but also to welcome this wonderful new brother, Matias. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me just give
Thank
you
you.
Bless you. Let me give you context for those of you who may not know who this gentleman is, because over the last 10, 12 years, he has become a major speaker on the platform of the human potential movement. So Mateus is a consciousness educator, and many know him as the Rememberer. Mateus was born in August 4th, 1987, yet has accessed many lives before this current life, revealing deep and expansive memories of exploring dimensions beyond the ordinary. This provides Mateus with an integral vision of the nature and essence of the cosmos. Mate's mission is to inform and educate, weaving life from a network of memories that help us all comprehend our authentic sacred origins, our identity, and our destiny. Welcome, Mr. De Stefano.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you for that welcoming.
it's my absolute pleasure. So the remembering began very early. I believe it was when we met prior that you told me it was around your 12th year when you began remembering.
Yeah, of course, since I was born, I could see and feel other things that were around, but the remembering by itself, it was in between 11, 12 years old. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was the moment that it all started. Mhm.
yeah. So prior to this, you had flashes of intuition, flashes of vision, were bombarded by stimuli, I would imagine. The entire universe was heralding your arrival, and so much stimuli. But presumably around 11, 12, the information began to develop into construct.
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah,
so?
mainly emotions. Like the emotions brought images and ideas, and all of it was very human related. Actually, at the beginning, it was more about. I would remember the pyramids, but not because I was looking at them, but because I was with my children or with my husband at that time. I was a woman, so. Um, so it was all related to what I was doing with the people around me that made me remember what happened. So for a 12-year-old boy, it was very very overwhelming to not just remember history, but remember so many people and to be there with all those people.
Yeah.
And yeah, and as I was growing up until I was 15, all the memories were even farther in time or other planets or other dimensions. So it was more and more and more
Wow.
every day. Mm.
Wow. And to create perspective, maybe it would be useful to give us an impression about, for example, the most extraordinary image that beset you, and that was absolutely fundamental in your knowing. So that was most extraordinary, and that was actually, although it was preternatural, it was actually really quite ordinary.
I think that when I was 15, the most extraordinary thing that happened was that I was laying down in my bed, and suddenly I was I felt that I was sleeping, but actually I was not sleeping, and the whole roof came to me like it was falling apart in a very mm, energetical way, and suddenly just one eye, a sphere of an eye, started to appear from it, and everything around the eye started to twist like a galaxy, and and as the eye was getting closer, I couldn't move, and so when the pupil of the eye touched my third eye, it was like like a whole sound of when you hit a gong,
Yeah.
and in that moment that hit the gong, I could see particles and all the structures of the universe, and it was like, I don't know how long I was in that situation, but that's the exact moment when I felt the dimensions, the creation, the loss of the universe, all the information that many years after I started to share, to teach, to help people understand. All of that was in just those minutes
Yeah.
uh, of of an extraordinary memory that it became part of me.
Yeah.
Um, so I remember that when I woke up, I was hitting my head against the wall, and I
Oh,
was
really?
crawling on the floor because I couldn't stand it in my body, and
Mm.
yeah, I felt that I was breaking apart. Like every part of me was like breaking into different dimensions, and I couldn't hold myself. Like, what is Matias in that moment?
Mm.
So I believe it was like kind of a buffet ceremony without having anything. So it
Mm.
was
Mm.
like a whole opening in 1 second. Yeah, maybe 15 minutes of the whole thing.
I mean, just extraordinary as a phenomenon. Many, perhaps there are people listening that have had similar experiences and will be warmed by how you describe it. And my next question, which you've already answered, was how did a 15-year-old process this? And of course, your physicality, your neurology was obviously reacting to the fact that your cells were literally being separated
Yeah,
by huge transfusions of light. And
yeah.
the images that were there. And yet, when you go into the very center of the story, as it were, the experience is a better way of putting it, what do you feel was the intelligence that was speaking to you?
What do I feel? What?
What was the intelligence that was speaking to you?
It didn't speak with any voice. It was
Yeah,
presence. It
I
was
mean
yeah.
metaphoric,
The
rather than literally.
Yeah. It was like infinite presence. It was like the feeling that no matter what I was looking at, this presence was very firm and stable there, and I felt that this being was this intelligence was like a like a spider web,
Mm,
actually. So it doesn't matter where you you move one string, it resounds everywhere, like if it's happening right there.
mm,
So um so he gave me a name in that moment, but actually the name that I felt is this gong that sounded in my head. So it introduced itself with that, which was um for me, now I say it gun, but actually was like like that. So 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 I summarize it in gun for friends. So
yeah,
and 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 now lately I've been calling it the weaver, because
mm,
that's how I felt it.
mm,
It's a consciousness that is weaving dimensions, that is weaving realities, and 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 he's only present there, like observing the vibrations of it.
mm,
So I was as I tapped into that consciousness, I was everywhere, and I couldn't understand the story into beginning or future. It was impossible to distinguish anything.
mm,
So, as you said, a 15-year-old boy that taps into that, it was. I thought I was of course going crazy, and I even asked my mom to take me to the psychiatrist or something, because for the next days I couldn't relate to anything. I forgot how to open a door.
yeah,
So it was so much that the simple things were like disappearing from my head. So
yeah,
I sometimes I forgot how to speak Spanish, or I don't know, or yeah, or to understand the colors or whatever was around me. So for like a year, I've been struggling with coming back to, okay, I have a body, I have, yeah, it was very complicated to tap in that consciousness.
And you know, as you share, I mean, what an extraordinary experience. I had something very similar, but not as profoundly vast as that. And 15 was when I first went to Egypt on a
Mm-hmm.
bonding exercise with my dad, who I had a complicated relationship with, who simply didn't understand the supernatural aspects of
Yeah.
of what I was sharing. Although I was very diluted into, well, actually, that's angel. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
A friend of his just happened to be there, coincidentally, who was one of the most profound French scholars in the esoteric arts. And he took me. My father came back to the United Kingdom, where we lived, of course, at that time. And Jacques took me all the way down the Nile, starting off, of course, by going into the Great Pyramid. And in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber, there was nobody there. I mean, this was in the 60s. This was a long time ago. So it must have been, what, 60, late 60s, 66, 67. And that's when Thoth came to me and I fainted. The whole of my consciousness
Yeah.
was, as it were, torn apart. So I completely understand what you're talking about. It's very interesting, isn't it? Because we're taken beyond these dimensions into multi-perceptuality, into multidimensionality. And
Yeah.
we need time in the density of our bodies to absorb what the light is doing in our cells, in the subatomic structure
Yeah.
of our being. So what an extraordinary gift for you. What an initiation, as bewildering as it might have been for your 15-year-oldness. And
Yeah.
of
It
course, it's
was.
a time when this chakra is really beginning to open.
Yeah,
Um,
what I perceived was like if the center of the brain became like a Wi-Fi antenna,
yeah,
and
yeah.
shifting the perception of everything that was happening inside my brain, and how I perceived the light, how I perceived the shapes, the structures, the every one of the five senses. I
Mm,
usually say that we are we tend to believe that when we tap into another dimension is like you are going to layers of heaven,
yes.
and that's a way that the ancients used to have to explain it, because it was difficult to put it in words, so they had to explain it with things that they had around, which was kingdoms. So you have the kingdom of this, the kingdom of that, and the realms of this. But actually, it's because they were living like that. Today, we would say, I don't know, the democracy of that, or the republic of whatever. So we could explain in different ways. Of course, with science, we have better ways to explain today what is a realm. Is actually a level of vibration. So wavelength of light. So. But what I felt inside was how these five senses that we have, they exponentially go into another level. So the same touch, or the same sight, or the same hearing, it goes like amplifying, and when all the brain is kind of working like a whole satellite to receive more signals from the everything, uh, it's not that you are um, uh, receiving something that is not possible to touch. Like I mean, for example, it kind of makes you feel that you can perceive the ultraviolet,
Mm,
or to feel frequencies that you are usually not able to hear, because our bodies are not designed for that. So
mm,
you can hear frequencies that sounds like languages
mm,
of beings that are speaking, that we don't usually hear their voices, like the trees, for example.
mm,
So now, of course, with technology, you can tap in and you can hear the different ticks and vibrations that are emitting, that the trees are emitting. But when you tap yourself with your brain, suddenly you hear them speak, and they don't speak English or Spanish. They just speak frequencies and pulses. So you can understand what they are saying, kind of, and you translate it into human language. So
mm.
so I think that what is overwhelming is that we try to find an explanation for
Yeah,
everything,
Yeah.
And if it doesn't match with our previous experience, so it's very complicated
Yes.
to actually. So we say, oh, it's from another realm, another dimension, but actually it's
Yeah.
ourselves expanding the way we perceive with the five senses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And of course, Christ, the Christos, Yeshua said, in my Father's kingdom there are many mansions. That's what
Hmm.
I'm reminded of. And we can look at that as being a literal construct of a big house or a mansion. But actually, I believe he was talking about multidimensionality.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally.
so many, thank you, such rich sharing. I have so many questions, and you can see me smiling and nodding because so much sharing. The experience that I spoke in a very limited way about meeting Thoth was preceded by Ptah coming in, and
Hmm.
this extraordinary sound where weight, space, and time were completely diluted into this fast moving tunnel of light,
Yeah.
which was just extraordinary. And of course, he wasn't in form. It was actually through sensation that I was actually able to make holographically an
Yeah.
understanding, rather through my limited understanding of a 15-year-old, I saw a hologram before me. And then the master came through. But when the master came through, it was this huge gong-like sound,
Yeah.
a mix of that, and also it was rather like the seraphic chorus of very, very deep voices, almost like a Russian male voice choir singing the Om.
Yeah.
Om. And it was on one single out breath. However,
Mhm.
fascinating, fascinating. So this was a huge initiation for you.
Mhm.
Did you become aware of your team around you in spirit after that initiation?
I actually knew them before.
You
Like,
did.
I remember when I was 3 years old, or actually, I made a drawing once when I was 4 or 3. I don't know. I remember, and no, I was 5 year old when my mom gave me some papers and I started to draw, and I remember I drew a circle, big circle with a tiny speck around, and she was like, what is that? And it's oh, this is how I came to life. So I remember the ovolus, and then I drew myself coming out of my mom, and drew many faces around
Mm,
that I remember
mm,
welcoming me to the world.
yeah,
And so I used to describe, as I was 3 years old, that the beings that were there observing me, sometimes
mm,
not speaking,
mm,
but their faces observing me in a very maternal way.
mm,
And so s- since I was 4 till I was 7,
mm,
these little creatures and beings were all the time explaining me about nature, about humanity, emotions, and so on. So all of that happened before I started to remember. So they used to say, when you will remember, use this that I'm teaching you now.
mm,
So they helped me to stand everything that would happen in the moment that I remember.
mm,
So
mm,
yeah, but it was all like a game, like kids playing. Of course, my level of consciousness in that moment, but they I remember one of them, like very tiny, like a fairy, let's say,
mm,
um, explaining me about how every tree, every stone has a soul, and they cannot speak my same language, so I have to speak their language.
mm,
So if I want to communicate, I have to learn how to sit like a rock. I need to learn how to move like a tree. So it was teaching me about the communication with the other realms, so I could understand them when I start to hear them. So it was for me, all this team that I call my team in other realms. They used to tell me that I I said to them, don't let me fail this time. So if I go to the wrong direction a little bit for 1 degree, just bring it all in and hit me back to the center.
Mm.
And so they always remind me that, and that they were here because they were preparing me so I don't get crazy or I don't go somewhere else that I'm not supposed to go, and that how every dark thing or bad thing that would happen in my life was actually an adjustment for something else. So it was like a teamwork for me, and it started to be more like a teamwork. For example, there was one day that they told me, you have to leave to Europe. You have to go to Europe soon, because there's a task that you have to accomplish there. And I was like, okay, but I don't have money to pay my ticket. So you pay my ticket and I will go. So I put my body, I put everything, I put my face, but I don't have the money to pay my ticket. So find a way and bring it to me. And one day after, someone called me from my hometown in Argentina and told me, you are the only one in this town that speaks Catalan, which is the language from Barcelona. So we want for you to represent us there. So can we pay you the ticket for you to go there to a conference? And I was like, sure. so so that's my team. I used to say that.
Okay.
That's why I usually like, some people say, why are you here? What are you doing there? And how Matias does to pay for the things that he's doing or living as he lives. And I said, I'm barely paying most of the things. it's it's very common to me.
Well, thereby hangs a huge story for us all, because you have implicit belief, faith, and trust that this is the way that it will be, because after all, you know that you're a refraction of light from the abundance of the source.
Mhm.
And yet, many of us are traumatized in not fully comprehending that through all
Mhm.
of the really challenging circumstances, and that we haven't made the transition. So the fact that you bring forth the information, but also the wonderful lightness, joy, playfulness, humor, and intelligence that you bring forth reassures in the most extraordinary way. Um, so, how fascinating. I've never met anybody before that had such a parallel experience, because the beings of light, there were three angels around me, unquestionably, right from the word go, from me lying in the cot and looking up into the light. But as
Yeah.
I began to grow as a human, as opposed to a thing, the elemental kingdom looked after me. So the fairies and the leprechauns and the gnomes and the dryads in the trees were all talking to me, as they still do. Unfortunately, I had a grandfather who was a farmer, a man of the soil, of great truth and great sincerity. And he would wake me whenever we stayed in the farmhouse at 5 o'clock in the morning, put me on his shoulder as a 4 or 5 year old, and take me off into the fields and show me the fairy rings.
Ah,
And he would sing to the fairies, and the fairies would come. He spoke a language which is slightly rather like the elf language that we hear in Lord of the Rings. It was quite
uh-huh.
extraordinary. Anyway, so I have many stories
So
about
far.
that. But how wonderful, because they were actually your team, or these particular beings within your team were able to caress your being internally, externally, with their wisdom, with their intelligence, with their energetic frequencies, so that you, as you said, would remain sane as you were going through this extraordinary experience. But
Yeah.
the original experience that you gave us when you were very young, 15, with that extraordinary, I see it as a vast initiation that is being given to you by cosmic avatars
Hmm.
that, that are very much around you and leading you. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sure prophetically you have an immense awareness of that. I'm just picking up all of these energies, which are really beautiful. Thank you for sharing them, because I happen to have the ability to see the beings that are around you. So
Hmm.
it's very, very exquisite. So we've gone from the most extraordinary experience to something that was very literal in terms of the physicality of why we spirits tend to choose to come into human bodies and experience the sensory landscape, the sensorium of our own beings and the way we pick up many imprinted informations from our natural habitats. As you began to move from that experience, particularly the 15-year-old experience, it must have been amazing to interface with 3D as well as to be in the experiential of constantly having all of these references going on and
Oh yeah.
expanding consciousness in a way that, for example, legitimized academia doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So did it move? How did it move from a purely sensation point of view? Did it go very fast? Did it go slowly? Were there great peaks of achievement where awareness was suddenly, and then you would have times where nothing would happen? How was it? How did you become experience of the cosmology of moving beyond light and time?
Well, of course, in between my 15 years old until I was around 18, 19, it was almost every day. Every
Mhm.
day there was sometimes it was like a lot in one day, and sometimes it was just a little bit, a tiny thing. So I used to write a little bit every day about some memories. I used to make drawings or maps, or even if I was in the classroom at school, I would just take notes of stuff and in other languages or in memories. And so I spend mostly those four or 5 years uh, every day going more and more, and like, yeah, it was a roller coaster of memories, emotions, information, a lot. And when I turned 19, two of my guides of part of my team show up, and they said, um, you have to now experience what it is to be a human, fully disconnected from source and disconnected from all your memories, so you can tap in what is this. And it was like, why? And it was desperate, like, because I didn't know another way. Um, so they said, if you don't know how it is to be disconnected, then you are not going to be able to be empathic with what other people are going through. And so you need to also be there, and to be able to communicate into a normal way. So So they say bye to me, and for like 2 years, I haven't had any feeling, any sensation of anything. Literally disconnected from everything, and that was during my university period. Um, um, yeah, kind of for a while in the university, and I remember I had to. I don't know. I was alone, and I needed to do very normal stuff. So I started to go around and paying bills, and all those things to ground, to look into my body, into going to class and everything. And um, and I started to like it. I started to the first months were terrible. I felt abandoned, and it was very annoying to just
Mm,
wake up and have nothing. But then it started to be like, oh, this is
mm,
so relaxing. That's why everyone forgets. So that's it's a mechanism of survival, actually, because you can enjoy simple things. You can enjoy um yeah, like the silly things of life. So it was like, so I started to enjoy it. I started to like it. And two years after that, I was sitting in a classroom in sociology, and one of my guides show up and said, "It's time." I was like, Time for what?" And so he said, "It's the moment to be reconnected, because soon many things will happen, and you have to be ready for them."
with it. So you were learning a 3D language.
I was learning on how to communicate with normally with people, to make friends, to understand how it is to take care of yourself in this reality, and have, yeah, a normal life.
Yeah.
So, but also to go through the struggles of I cannot tap in, I cannot
Yeah.
connect
Well,
to
it must
anything.
have been so frustrating, because suddenly all of
Mhm.
that extraordinary, I see it as an immense gift, a
Yeah,
supernatural gift of, yeah,
yeah,
of constantly
and
being in touch was not there.
totally.
And was this in Argentina?
Yeah, this was in Argentina. Yeah, and I feel that that happened to many kids or young people, that eventually they disconnect and they don't know how to come back to it, so they stop believing in it, or
Yeah.
they just say, "Ah, must have been children thing,"
Yeah.
and so we stop it and we start to just concentrate in this box here,
Yeah.
and that's it. And so and somehow you start to kind of enjoy not being connected to anything, and just to do the normal thing.
Right.
And when it cut, I was when the communication was cut, I was saying that I was in sociology class in the university, and having a normal class and anything, and suddenly one of my guides show up and
Ah.
says, "Okay, it's time." And I was like, uh, "Time for what?" And said, "Your practice has been over. Has so you have to get ready for the next stage and everything that is happening now." And I said, "But I still have like 3 years more of university. Like I have to have a title. I have to, to get there." And and they were like, "No, you don't need that. Like you don't need a title." And I was like, "But how people would believe or will call me or will how can I explain this if I am not, I don't know, doctor in something or licensed in whatever?" And they said, "No, you don't need that. The only thing that you needed here is to practice how it was, how it is to work for that, how it is to do it. But all your mission will start in a few weeks to in a different way. So if you are not there for the alignment of what is happening, you're going to lose time because you have to wait another 6 years." And it was like, and I started to fight with them, like, "No, I'm staying in the university, I'm finishing this, and no, 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 no." And it was a whole situation until they basically destroyed me,
Right. Right.
because that's why I told them, like, "Bring me back no matter how." So 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 I remember that next day I was very present in the class, even sharing with the teacher and everything. And suddenly I woke up on the floor, and
Mm.
everyone in a circle observing what was happening, and
Mm.
an ambulance outside the classroom, and the psychiatrist from the mental hospital that was there to pick me up, because they was like speaking in languages and making drawings of pyramids and stuff in the floor. And yeah, so that was like for a month of us fighting, like, "No, I'm staying, no, you have to go, no," and so on, until I finally surrendered. So and yeah, well,
And
now I'm here.
so during that transition, because again, we're getting this very clear perspective of the completely holistic nature of the way that spirit works within these dimensions of experience, within these human bodies that we have. During that experience, the, the so-called psychotic experience, do you know how long you were in an altered state of consciousness, conveying to everybody about the geometry of the pyramids?
I no, I think it was not that long, but maybe 20, 30 minutes.
That's still
Uh,
quite
oh well, it might be long. Might be
still
long.
quite long, isn't it? Because I mean, you're always obviously completely looked after, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, completely looked after. But at the same time, in terms of interfacing with 3D, that sort of experience is very unusual. It's like, for example, or during the early stages of me training young actors, that because there were the tensions that they held in their body through all of the very deep breath work that I would do,
Hmm.
moving into sound, that they would often faint and go into seizure. And of course,
Hmm.
everybody would be panicking.
Yeah.
And I would be standing smiling, thinking, yes, keep going, keep going. Because
You
it
got
was a
it.
way of what he's saying, I'm going to quit on you because you just moved me into rictus on so many
Yeah.
occasions. I'm going to quit on you so that I can actually move into the very center essence of my being. Anyway,
Mm.
so, obviously, you and I have a lot to share, but I'd love to, in terms of the purpose of this deep dialogue, I'd love to move on into the very advanced stages of your perceptual awareness and the information that the team have given you.
Mhm.
And because if we may indulge, I mean, I know we talked about it when we first met, but if we could indulge in Egypt as as a reconstruction of Atlantis, if we could start off with
Mhm.
Atlantis, because I feel that the emanation that comes between us, although independently, your information is just fascinating and ravishing, and as you see, I'm really enjoying the parallels. But I feel that at this time, the information that you have about Atlantis and the co-creation with Egypt, it's so quintessential for the vibrational field to open within our world, and I
Mhm.
see that between us we can create that force.
Mhm.
um, I don't want to sound grandiose in saying that because I'm in full receipt and respect of who you are as a divine being on earth at this time. But at the same time, I feel that we have a connection. So I find it's fun to move into those realms. So are you with me? If we could step forward to your extraordinary awareness of your lives in Atlantis and
Mhm.
the roles thereof, and perhaps a way of doing it rather than just telling us stories about who you were. Perhaps you could give us a perspective of the way that you perceived your life, your lives in Atlantis, and
Mhm.
how then the transposition between Atlantis and Egypt took place for you. Is that
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah. I have, when I was a child and I started to remember that with 12 years old, I didn't know what Atlantis was. Of course, I remember the name Hephaestion
Mm,
uh, as a name as we used to call the entire Atlantis empire, and we called the Atlanteans the Hephian,
mm,
and 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 us the ones that live in Egypt, well, not Egypt but the Nile, we call it the Chemian.
yeah.
So
Mm,
uh, so we um, when I started to remember that, my first memory of all of it was me as a woman,
mhm,
aside my husband in that
mhm,
life, and I was worried, and I was very worried because there has been a meeting in 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 the territory of Hem,
mhm,
in the Nile, that said we need to accomplish a whole cycle to find the right note to
mhm,
correct the system. There's something that is broken and we need
mhm,
to repair it.
mhm,
So the only way to do it is through time. We cannot do it now. We have to do it with our other aspects of ourselves in different timelines.
mhm,
So that feeling that I got was, how I'm gonna do it. What if I get lost in time?
mhm,
What if after I die I don't know how to come back, or how to do it? So the
mhm,
entire I was in history class that day when I started to remember all of that, and I saw a white pyramid in front of me and a red lion in front of me, which is the Sphinx, but it was all a lion, and I was in front of the surrounded by a few temples, and it was completely different because it was not desert, it was all green around, and so I could feel also that it was cold, not cold, but of course it was the glaciation. So I didn't know, I didn't say, oh, it's 12,000 years ago. I understood that it was 12,000 years ago because of describing what I saw.
mhm,
So the animals that were there, the whole situation, it gave me the time. Oh yeah, I remember eyes close to Turkey. So in the traditions, we used to say you don't go to the people in the eyes, and so it was a whole thing about that. So of course, it was the glaciation period, like 12,000, 13,000 years ago,
Mm.
and so that located me where I was, and the whole thing was you need to remember what is happening now because
Mhm.
it's going to be useful in the next cycle. And that next cycle was 12,000 years after, which is now.
Yeah.
So it's funny what we call past lives, because it's not that I actually was her in that life,
Mm.
but the same spirit was projected in two directions.
Mm.
And I could feel her and me and
Mm.
many others around at the same time. So
Mm.
so I understood that it was not like my soul incarnating, but it
Mm.
was my spirit projecting
Yeah.
itself in different timelines.
Yeah.
And but at that time I didn't have the ways to communicate that. I
Mm.
of course, for me, it was like my past life.
Mm.
And so the whole thing was there's a mission that we have to accomplish, which is to repair time.
Mm.
Someone broke time in the future, and now
Right.
we have to fix it in the past
Right.
as we walk through the present. So it
Mm.
was a whole paradoxical thing about time, and how the Atlantean civilization was a result of us trying to tune in back into what we were supposed to be. So,
Mm.
so suddenly the whole civilization turned out to be uh, a school of initiation where
Mhm.
every human, no matter in which social class you were, you had to go through certain teachings, because they said, um, in order for all of us to go as a species to the next level of consciousness, everyone has to have the clues. Because if only one tiny group of people has the clues, so they can then in the next life tap in into the ones that has no clue.
Mm. Mhm.
So they understood that education on the spirit was so important for, so every cell could have the data, so
Mm.
every body could have the information, no matter where you would tap in or reincarnate in the next ones. So of course there was a very divided civilization, meaning there were like three or four different levels of society, but all of them needed to go through the process. And the
Mhm.
ones that were obligated to do it were the royalty,
Mhm.
the blue blood, let's say. So the royalty that we call the families, um, that's nine. They were basically the ones that were obligated by the law of the divine to do every step of that. So it was not easy. It was not like a funny thing. It was not like, oh, we are rich and they're poor. It was like, oh gosh, like now I have to do all this initiatic thing, because they were um, the representatives of the vision and the hearing of all the rest. So
Mhm.
if they don't tap in correctly into the Holy Spirit, so the others won't know how to do it. So that's
Mm.
why the upper class needed to do it constantly.
Mm.
Um, so the whole design of our civilization was about how a spirit can express itself here,
Mm.
not according to how we do it today, which is how can we as humans become more spiritual
Mm.
and to eventually leave this dimension or
Mm.
go to the realms of God, let's say. So the point of view was completely different. The point
Mm.
of view for the Atlantean civilization was, how can we make God to be here?
Mhm.
How can we make God to experience the matter and not to lose itself?
Mhm.
So the whole thing was about enjoying. The whole thing was about the daily practices
mm,
on enjoying life, but also working properly with the body, with the soul, with the spirit, the mind, in order to have the stability to be able to hold God here in the
mm,
present.
mm,
And one of the reasons was because we kind of felt that something was off in our
mm,
system, that we
mm,
got away from what we were supposed to do. So
mm,
instead of saying, oh, this is all a mess, so we have to escape and go back to God, they said,
mm,
how can we bring it back so we
mm,
could all be tuned again and we
mm.
can correct the course?
Yeah.
So that's what all the temples were about. The pyramids were about. It was all about describing building structures that could uh, work like a machine that would download the divine here.
Yeah.
And so the upper class would go inside the temples and the pyramids to download that, and then they would walk out of it with the presence of God. And that's why we believe there were many gods.
Yes.
And that's why we related people with gods like Isis, Osiris. They were actually concepts, but they
Mm,
were priests and priestesses or upper class society that they tune in into the Holy Mother or into the Holy Father or whatever, and they walked out representing that information. So everyone understood, oh, they did it, so we have to practice on how to hold that energy. And
that's, mm,
so the whole civilization was about bringing back everything to the right cycle. That's
mm.
why we had so many calendars related to the moon, to the sun, to Sirius, to Venus. So we were trying to find out how to transcend through time by correcting time all the time.
And fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Have you written this, or you're speaking it a lot?
I I usually speak it more than yeah,
Okay,
writing.
because it has to be lived in the moment through sound rather
Mhm.
than concretized through the printed word, because it's going back into the original vibration. I'd love to pick up the theme that you uttered earlier about the fact that the note was out of order, the note
Mhm.
was disharmonic, and also, if we may, to concentrate on the high adepts, what you were referring to as being the royal families. As we know, the word hierarchy from the Greek means the rule of the sacred,
Mhm.
which of course has been completely altered by our contemporary understanding, particularly since the end of the 19th century, and the
Yeah.
corruptions that have taken place through our societies. But actually, we're talking about adepts that were initiated on countless occasions into these beautiful rituals using
Mhm.
prayer, meditation, sound, all sorts of extraordinary experiences that we could can just talk for about 4 hours enumerating what those experiences.
Yeah.
But I'd love to bring in the substance of the fact, as you began speaking, of the extraordinary beauty, grace, love, wisdom,
Mm.
passion, empathy of the divine, of
Mhm.
moving into the exalted orders of the divine, and how we need to, as lowly humans, humble humans, we need to become aware of
Mhm.
this extraordinary gymnastic journey back into that feeling is the language of the soul, rather
Mhm.
than being consumed by the technology, consumed by the cerebralization that is
Mhm.
actually, as you started, it's this extraordinary sensual,
Yeah.
sensory experience of what
Yeah.
this intercommunication is all about. Does that? I'm sure you're picking me up psychically, so you can see where I'm asking this. It's
Yeah.
interesting
What?
because you speak. There are many questions that I want to ask you, and as soon as I think them, you speak them.
Yeah.
I don't.
That's true. Um, there's uh there I think that today one of the reasons why there's so much misunderstanding on how to actually connect with that information and to respect those the grace and the love and that hierarchy, um, is basically because the people that was in charge of that hierarchy, there was a moment that they also disconnected
Mm.
because of conflicts, because of the
Mm.
periods of the stars. So they disconnected. So they started to, because they lost the inner power, uh, they started to control.
Mhm.
So I would put it in I think it's simple way. Imagine that you have a queen bee with in a beehive, and all the other bees know their purpose without no one telling what to do, because the queen bee knows who she is.
Mhm.
So because knowing who she is, the vibration gives them the tasks, gives everybody the recognition, oh, I am good for this, to serve the hive. So I'm not serving the queen, I'm serving the vibration that she emits just by vibrating and generating energy. Okay, so that's how a beehive works. So all the bees are gonna look for flowers according to the vibration that the queen is sending to them. So it's fascinating. It's amazing how it works. So what happens if the queen bee forgets how to vibrate? And it cannot receive the vibration from the whole. It's out of tune. What happens
Mm.
if it's out of tune? So all the beehive will be out of tune. So all the bees won't know what exactly to do. So they were asked to the queen, what should I do? And the queen would say, well, I think you should do this and you should do that and you serve me. So it starts to control
Mhm.
the hive because no one knows what to do. Not because no one knows, but because she doesn't know. So the main one. So the reason why in nature there are hierarchy is not because of control and power, it's because of grace and divine. And that grace and divine is not about telling the others what to do, it's about I am what I am.
Mm.
And once I tapped into that, the presence emits a vibration that everyone knows what to do.
Mm.
And that's the beauty of
Mm.
that
Mm.
infinite presence of grace.
Mm.
And because in history there were so many kings and queens that forgot how to do that,
Mm.
they became the hierarchy that we know today. They became these people that are controlling or speaking behind the walls to convince someone to do something different. And it was very political and economical. And suddenly it turned out to be like a cold thing, in which it was bring me things and I will give you my blessing. And so it transformed into a whole different thing. And and then, if you were out of that, if you were connected to your own vibration, so they were jealous of it, so I have to kill the vibration of that being, so let's kill witches, let's kill the wizards, let's, so, and then let's kill the scientists, the
Yeah.
alchemists, the people
Yeah.
that are discovering how to tap into the truth. So the science turned out to be against
Mm.
religion, turned out to be against the spiritual, not the spirit, but the spiritual. So right now we have a society that is built upon people against the divine power.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because that divine power, the power disappeared a long time ago. So now everything that was related to that divine power, uh, it's bad. It's something we have to kind of, not to connect with. So everyone turned out into the science, which is actually the actual spirit, the
Mm.
atoms, the vibration, the frequencies, like the understanding of quantum mechanics. So that's the actual spirituality. That's the
Mm.
actual being. But because they are not tapped into their own truth, they look for the truth outside.
Mm.
And because that would be going to the divine, which is something that they don't understand yet. So until I don't dissection the body of God, I cannot be God. So actually it's like God can know them know itself, by being it. So what I want to say about this is that all this hierarchy and systems of bringing that order into our lives is very ceremonial.
Mm.
And the reason why it's very ceremonial, and we took away all the ceremonial ways, and because we think it's controlling and all of that. But I will give some example. Like in the universe, you have a cube, okay, a perfect cube, and that is information. And you here have a triangle, so you are a triangle, but you want to tap in and to connect with the cube, but your triangle is not enough. You have to do a lot of work in order to make the triangle into a square and then multiply the square into 6 faces until you shape it. So that will take lives, months, a lot of work, study, until you transform your tiny triangle into a cube. So some people, what they do is to create a ceremony for the cube to be downloaded, which means I know that I am a triangle, but I have to create a structure that holds the cube, so I can remember that I don't have to get lost in my triangle. I have to download all of that, which is too big. So how do I do it? Well, I build stuff with the shape of a cube. I honor things with the shape of a cube. I I I create around me a house with the shape of a cube. I create an altar where I put a cube. So I start to download in the physical way the concept which is geometrical. Because if you think about it, for example, our DNA has the shape of hexagons and pentagons together. So an
Mm.
hexagon and a pentagon are very ancient symbols in every religion. And when you put them together, you have adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine. You start to create the structure of our DNA. So if you
Yeah.
put all the symbols of different religions together, what you create is DNA. But because everyone thinks like, no, the thymine is more important than the guanine, so you cannot create a human being if those four are fighting each other. It's creating like a mess of connection when actually all of them has a part to combine. So a ceremonial thing would be to honor that pentagon, that hexagon, and try to find the ways to, with grace, to put them together
Mm.
uh, along our life to see how it works. So, and for that we need those ceremonies. And sometimes a very simple ceremony is the family eating together on Sundays,
Mm.
for example, and that is a very normal ceremony, which is sharing a meal. Um, but there are thousands and millions of them. But the reason why we are so out of tune is basically because we forgot that that is the actual divine.
Mm.
It's to tap in something that is so big, like for example, the royalty today, like all these ceremonials that have the crown, the I don't know, the whole things that you use and so dress up, and a throne. And from our normal point of view, we would say, what is all that for? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But you're trying to download the spirit of a whole country, which is in another level of consciousness that is so big, related to so many stories, that if you don't use those symbols in the physical, then you're not connected to that level of consciousness.
Yeah.
So, so
I'm
those are the.
so glad you said that because within the richness, the vast landscape that you're sharing with us, there are points of resurrection in these periods of time phase that we're living where there is, as we know, a fear within many of our peoples,
Mhm.
a confusion, and a great fear of the damage that is being created by all the varying themes that are basically all about moving from one order into another.
Mhm.
The dislocation, the deconstruction of the central organizing principles, and how there are other factors like Islam, for example, that is
Mhm.
wanting to rule the world, etc., etc. But in these moments, for example, I was very intimately connected with the coronation of King Charles. There are these moments in the coronation ceremony that are hallowed, and they go back over 1,000 years. Within the 1,000 years of monarchy, the only remaining monarchy in any of the European countries here. Isn't that interesting? With London being the Earth star chakra, this
Mhm.
tiny island going back, 150, 200 years ago, creating the British Empire, which is still there in a different form. However, the point you were
Yeah.
mentioning, the sacred element of the ceremony, where in the moment, just before he receives the crown, oil from King Solomon's temple is placed on the forehead, on the breast, and on his hands. And that was the most hallowed area of the coronation ceremony that was not allowed to be televised when Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, was literally made a high priestess.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there are many corollaries that are beginning to awaken in extraordinary ways. How can we begin to make sense of the great disharmonies that are taking place by finding balance in harmony, in unison? And there are a group of people who are emerging, who are intellectuals, but are using their hearts as brave warriors, spiritual warriors, even though many of them are agnostic, interestingly. They're not
Mhm.
atheists, but they're agnostic.
Yeah.
They're moving forward and they're speaking a level of truth that is resurrecting all of the essential beliefs in Western enlightenment, which, of course, as we know, go all the way back to the Hermetic principles, go all the way back into Egypt, go all the way back into Atlantis, go all the way back, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. So I just thought, because unfortunately we're moving to a point of completion in our conversation. I would love it to go on and on and on and on. I feel that what you're saying is so unique, and in my 70 years of being on this planet, I haven't actually heard some of the wise people that have influenced me place this extraordinary amount of information in the dexterous way that you place it.
Thank
So it really is exquisite. However, so how do we bring this to a point of completion? I
you.
wonder if you could, I wonder if you could synthesize, just make simple why you feel that the glory of Atlantis, the glory of Egypt, is being resurrected at this time to teach us something about this time phase that we're living on planet Earth.
Well, as I said about the echo of time, we are all remembering that somehow. We all remember our slice of it. And because we are receiving the data on how to repair that, it's
Right,
the other phase of
right.
reparation. So that's why there are so many people like you, like me, that we are remembering, connecting to those specific civilizations. Of course, also there's the Pacific Ocean ones,
Yeah.
like the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean civilizations that are trying to balance that data. So
Mm,
so many people um, um, are remembering emotions, memories, feelings, data. Uh, Techniques or many other things
mm,
related to what happened 12,000 years ago.
mm,
And the reason is because we are on an echo of that specific moment. So
mm,
we have to pay attention uh, not on the bad things that happened in that moment, which was the cataclysms, the end of everything, but what were they doing and preparing us
mm,
for
mm,
our
mm,
transformation.
mm,
And that would be not trying to find out if they have technology. The technology in that time was us, was
mm,
the human body with the stone, with the plants, and we converge all of it together, not thinking that they had a technology outside and they were clever and intelligent. That's our point of view. But they managed to become one with everything. And here often comes the question, so why they disappear if they were so tuned into everything? Precisely for that. Because they were tuned, most of them knew they needed to transform. They needed to do something completely different. And those who perished, they didn't want to change. They just wanted to keep on going with the same system. So I think that that's one of the main clues that we have from that story to understand. It was
Yeah.
not how they built the pyramids, it
Yeah.
was about how they were tuned into the cycles of time. And we are right now at the edge of a cycle of time, beginning a new one. So everything that each one of us is remembering, tapping in, connecting, is to remind us what are the essence of the information, like the sacred geometry, the vibration, the sounds, the all the stories that they told us with the hermetic principles, which all the hermetic principles are in every movie. So if you go to every storytelling of the last centuries, you have hermetic principles. So it's not about maybe sitting there and trying to read a book about Thoth, but sometimes it's also about watching, I don't know, Alice in the Wonderland, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah. So and you can see hermetic principles there and try to understand what they're talking about. So I believe that we are in a process of transition. We are not in a life in which we are going to see the results of the harmonization.
Yes.
But yes, we are in the process of transition where we are putting the information, the data together back. It's like if a lot of people in Atlantis left the books around in the planet for someone to grab them and start to put them back together in the library. So that's what we are doing right now. It's the time of putting it all in. Yeah, connected
That's
again.
that's absolutely brilliant because it brings the whole of our conversational energy. I mean, there are so many lights moving through this, but it brings it into this wonderful fontal of this really, really high vibrational process. And therefore, you gave an intimation of it that thinking back, many people are feeling the echo of Atlantis, but they're just exploring it from a traumatic point of view. And
Exactly.
that actually, if we can keep the awareness of the fact that the priests and the priestesses knew what was taking place,
Mhm.
and therefore they were able to lift the vibration. And so, okay, so landmass sank to the ocean floor, whatever it did.
Yeah.
Geology shifted, axis shifted. The point is that we knew what was taking place, and therefore we were in communion with the divine through
Mhm.
this sacred principle of ceremony, of ritual, of solemn rite, where there is an offering and a receiving, and an offering and a receiving, which is what I'm sure you get really preoccupied by that echo in any of the great temples in Egypt, this
Yeah.
wonderful, humble offering,
Mhm.
receiving, and that an offering is placed in order to receive
Mhm.
from the Mateus.
Yeah.
This is the most amazing conversation, and I thank you immeasurably for what you've done to me in my whole being, my whole consciousness. Also, as a time of remembering the echo and
Mhm.
moving within the echo, so that remembering then translates into another force where
Mhm.
we just feel ourselves to be at one with the echo, and therefore we go back to the original alpha note. It's interesting. I'm going to send you every week. I do a channeling from the 12 angels of Atlantis, and
Mhm.
this week the whole exposition is on how time as a construct is being contracted to allow for the light species that are the new light species that are coming in to awaken mineral particles within the rocks, within the earth itself, within the deep bedrock where all
Cool.
the memories are stored to allow the reverberation of the echoes to come forth. And then time will move into a multidimensional experience of other perceptuality.
Mhm.
Fascinating. I would
So
love for us to reconnect maybe in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months
sure,
to
of
reconnect
course.
if we may and pick up from this moment and take it. That would be absolutely fascinating.
Totally,
Uh,
yeah. course.
on behalf of all the people listening in, this is not live, obviously, this is a recording, but when they do listen in, from my deep, deep part of my heart and the very core of my soul, the pith of my soul, I want to say thank you to you for being who you are and bringing us these memories. And this sounding of the note of the echo is absolutely exquisite. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
And for all,
for the space and your work too.
oh, bless you, darling. All of the people listening in, there will of course be a website connection to Matias, so that you can see his wonderful. Oh, there it is. It will actually be there for you. And if you haven't already tuned into theangelsofAtlantis.com, go there, because you'll see we're doing some very exciting things with the angels, who again are allowing us to remember in the way that Matias has been speaking to us. So bless you for being here. Matias, would you just stay where you are for a moment while we close down? Because I'd love to say a
Yeah,
few
sure.
things personally. Thank you. Ryan, so thank you very much.